My name is Shashi Kiran, and I recently joined Nile a little over a month ago to lead up some of our marketing efforts. I came over from Checkpoint Software, where I served as the CMO till about July-ish. And today we're going to be talking about how we reimagine security in the local area networks using AI-powered NaaS. And NaaS, as many of you know, is Network as a Service, right? So I'm going to kick things off, introduce you to the company, what we do, why we are here, and then we'll talk about what's the architectural shift Nile's bringing about that is leading us to this conversation, how it helps reinforce security. It's going to be covered by Suresh, the Chief Product Officer and one of the co-founders of the company. Then we're going to start to bring some of what we talk about. So it isn't just slideware. We're going to take a use case led approach. So Shiv, who heads up our product management, will come over and unveil a few use cases from a security perspective. And we'll also share some demos. But what we also wanted to do was to bring in a customer of ours who can share with you why they went with Nile, what was they were looking for. And this is going to be Drew from Jet Zero, right? So let's keep the session interactive and we'll get the ball rolling. So with that, I just wanted to share with you a bit about Nile for many of you that are new to the company. This was founded a few years ago with the simple mission of saying we want to be the easy button for network and security for on-premises deployment with a solution that just works, right? And in some ways, the concept is embodied in the name of the company itself, Nile, because when you think of Nile, it's really about water. And all of us know that networks are fairly complicated over the ages. And how do you make something relatively simple to consume? And so it's a concept where you want networks to just flow, which is what the NaaS terminology embodies. And today you also poll a few people and you ask 100 men marooned on an island, do you want your wife to be with you or do you want Wi-Fi? And 99 of the 100 will say, I want Wi-Fi. And for my wife who's watching, I was the only guy who said wife. So again, you ask women, you want your husband or broadband? And you'd say, hey, I want broadband. So kidding aside, the point being, connectivity is the lifeblood of most organizations. And today you cannot dissociate connectivity from security. The two go hand in hand. But unfortunately, that's not the case in terms of how things were built. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve. And that's the mission statement. And the people that built this company were essentially people who built the gear that runs the internet that most of us are on today. So some of the names you might recognize as co-founders and backers of the company are John Chambers, who's the former CEO and chairman of Cisco. His chief development officer, Pankaj, is the CEO of Nile, and he ran an organization of about 30,000 people. So there are a lot of people who knew how to build systems at scale that really power what most of us are using today. And that's the same philosophy that has been brought into Nile. And if you just look at it from a numbers perspective, we're operating in about 30 countries and a number of verticals. You'll see where we start to span into. The company's been highly innovative, churning out a lot of patents which are driving this architectural shift that we're making today. We just debuted as a visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for unified wired and wireless, and hopefully we'll be in a few others in the foreseeable future. Some scale of deployments, we have our solution powering and running a warehouse which is over 12 million square feet. And you see, users, we were able to handle over 200,000 users on a concurrent setting. So these are some stats that you will see with regards to Nile and how we're building the company and scaling things up. Now, what does this mean in regards to security, right? And that's really the reason why all of us are here. I think the way to start about looking at security is not in isolation, but holistically across the enterprise. And we all know that for applications to run, you need underlying infrastructure that needs to be inherently secure. And if we dial the clock back the last 15, 20 years, there's been a tremendous amount of focus that's gone on into data centers, right? So you've seen data center infrastructure that was clunky now become much more of a converged pool with compute, compute servers, storage, systems, applications sort of coming together. There's a tremendous amount of investment that has gone into the data center and by definition, the cloud. The cloud, every cloud is somebody's data center. And if you look at it, the convergence that's been there has been a result of the unification. There's a lot of emphasis on simplifying things because we all know, complexity is the number one attack vector, and everybody's looking at simplification. You hear talks about platformization and things like that, but a huge emphasis on automation as well. And so that's brought in a degree of predictability and security to a certain extent in the data center and cloud environments. And over the last decade or so, we've seen that extend into the wide area as well. And you're all familiar with the notions of SD-WAN, zero trust extending there, and then SASE, which is essentially a convergence of network security. But when you now start to look beyond the WAN and into local area environments, we see that there isn't a standardized solution. There's a huge amount of standardization that happened in the data center and cloud. We started to see that in the context of the WAN. But when you look at the LAN, it's a big question mark. And unfortunately or fortunately, this is where all of us are, right? We are the users. So we come in there, we bring our devices, and we have surveillance cameras, printers, refrigerators, whatnot, all of these things that we term as IoT, OT, that's there. And these, by definition, aren't necessarily secure today. And so when you look at the surface area of attack across the entire enterprise, the place where you have the most users, the most devices, has the least investment and is the least secure. And so from an enterprise perspective, this is an area that really begs the same degree of unification, simplification, automation that we started off in the data center and cloud, started taking into the WAN to bring about. And so that's the area that Nile is starting to tackle. So today, when we look at this landscape, the question is, how do you make the LAN a first-class citizen of the enterprise from a security standpoint, in much the same way as we've had it in the data center and the WAN. And when you look at the LAN, what are we talking about? We're talking about corporate headquarters. We're talking about warehouses, hospitals, banks, universities, name it. Any place where users come, like in this room or in a bigger setting. How do we kind of secure that? And in other words, how do we bring this data center class security into local area environments and make the LAN a first-class citizen of enterprise security? So that's the mission that we're on, and it's a huge problem to tackle. It's an ambitious undertaking, and there's a lot of corporate spaghetti in terms of how these environments are deployed, and we want to bring in a degree of standardization and start to make them inherently more secure. So why now? This has been a long-standing issue to a certain extent. So why now? On one hand, you see the progression of things that are happening in the data center and WAN, and when you start to look at local area on-premises environments, we're having the return to office mandates. People are coming back into office environments, into universities, and there's a mandate coming in many cases to come in 5 days a week. But there's also hybrid work that is prevalent. So when people come in, obviously they need to have that connected experience, which is inherently secure. The second thing we're seeing is, because of the pandemic, a lot of companies ended up pushing out refresh of their gears. Typically, these are refreshed 5 to 7 years, and they said, okay, we don't have anybody in the office, so let me just focus on the remote user, the data center, let me strengthen, invest there. So this has been deferred to a lot of reasons, and the longer you defer the refresh, it starts to create issues with security vulnerabilities. And OT has been an issue that not a lot of people have been addressed. It's been an overlay solution that isn't inherently secure. And today, 1/3 of the security breaches are happening in these environments. More than a third are happening because the lack of OT devices being embedded with security. And to top it all off, you're having a number of institutions really challenging their IT organization to do more with less. We aren't seeing the expansion of the IT workforce. We're saying much more constraints. Budgets are getting constrained. Everybody is being asked to look at taking advantage of AI, which also happens to be a security threat as well. So budget resource constraints. So I look at it as the perfect storm of the three W's. You're having the workplace challenge, we're having the workspace challenge, and the workforce challenge. And so that's the perfect storm where people are saying, okay, how do I go get ahead of this? Because you don't want a huge surface area of your enterprise to be exposed. And how do you do it in an easy way? Because if you look at the LAN status quo today, what is it that we see? On one hand, these have been built up over a number of years, and you see this security solution being a solution of one box on top of another box, one solution on top of another solution. So it's kind of stacked up, and every time a new security concept comes in, it's an add-on to this box, which is essentially a lot of point solution representing complexity. And when you stack these up, they're also not simple to manage. Each one is a different management plane. Each one has a different management console. Each one has a different update cycle, different patch requirement, different licensing. So inherently, there are a lot of operational complexity that's built in. And then, as we talked about, budget and resources aren't coming in flood either. Some try to go down the path of a pure play MSP, but the MSP doesn't own the technology. They're there to manage it. And so then you get into this wall of frustration with trouble ticketing. So net, most organizations that want to embrace the concepts of zero trust, like you have in data center and WAN, are essentially challenged to do so. And in many cases, as Gartners and others are predicting, they're going to walk away because the nirvana to get to zero trust is sometimes more complicated in this spaghetti mess that we have. So that's a challenge, right? So how do you kind of solve this? And our thesis was you cannot solve this equation by bringing one more box and stacking it on top of it. It's not a pure play appliance driven solution. It's not another overlay software that you bring in. Because if this needs to be solved, you need to take a first principles approach, which is the rethink of the current architecture. And so when you start to say, okay, how do I rethink? How do I solve this problem and start to make it go away? We have to reimagine this architecture from the foundation up. So take all of these point solutions, and much as we did in the data center and in the WAN, can we start to unify that? Could we unify that stack and bring in a lot of things that would be disparate appliances and software elements and bake that into a foundational fabric itself? So that's the step number one that we've taken, which is to build a zero trust fabric that embeds a number of things that would otherwise be sort of disparate, and things like wired and wireless. Even with companies that are claiming unity, they have different policy engines, different management constructs. We've unified that. We've unified network and security. We have unified IT, OT, brought that natively into the fabric. So that's a foundational element. The second thing is, how do you start to simplify the operations? A number of you in the security space know that 70% of any of these vulnerabilities are people misconfiguring with all good intent. And there's a trend now to move away from these hands-on operations to hands-off, bring in autonomous operations powered by AI. So we want to simplify these operations and take ownership of the life cycle. So this isn't a box play where we are saying somebody else go run the operation. We're saying we will have to take accountability for the operations for it to be inherently secure, and with AI ops done in an autonomous way. And the third really is about taking ownership of the service delivery, making it easy, like water, to manage change. It has to be utilitarian. Change management should be easier. Making things come up should be easy. And business adds, moves, and changes should be relatively easy. So we've brought in constructs of an AI-powered service cloud, much the way you think of SaaS. Can we bring that to NaaS? So those are the theses that Nile is looking at. And it isn't looking at these as three different silos. The power is really in how you bring them together into a seamless entity where the zero trust fabric, which lays the foundation, is converged with the ability to deliver it as a service. And all of this is through simplified operations that are powered by AI. And so you can think about it as this power of zero. So you have zero trust, zero touch with zero configuration, zero provisioning required in a way. And also getting down the path of zero capex, because a number of companies are really challenged to scrounge budget every 5 to 7 years and go make this huge investment, which is why they're deferring investments. So can we bring this into completely an OpEx model with predictable cost structure? So that's the Nile, and we really, really want to be the easy button for network and security in the local area environment. So with that, I want to just expose you to how we think of this architecturally, and we'll go do a deeper dive and introduce you to some of the components. So what I talked about as the zero trust fabric is essentially the foundational layer around which a lot of these things are built. So we have our APs, our switches, our sensors, gateways coming about, and these are service edge portfolio on the LAN, much as you look at SASE and services edge on the from a wide area perspective. We have an AI-powered services cloud, which is where a lot of the intelligence resides. And we have a services catalog, which is continuing to expand. And much as you can think of a software services catalog, think of a network and security services catalog, which you can download or sort of invoke. It's not a download concept, but it's a invocation concept where you add new services. So this is really what we're enabling for our customers. And the two things by the side that you see are very important. On one hand, as I mentioned, we take accountability for the operations. And that means we have our own AI ops command center, which looks at the entire entity and takes ownership of a service SLA, a performance SLA, end to end, with the backing of AI, getting into a lot more predictive capability, closed loop automation, ability to have monitoring 24/7, things like that. And we're the ones who own the technology with all of the hardware and software, but we also deliver it as a service. And that's a very unique concept in the industry today. And then obviously customers, they can also have visibility control. We have third-party integration we'll talk about. And this is what gets rolled out to different institutions, as we talked about, addressing the needs of securing users, IT, IoT, and devices in a holistic way, right? So that's sort of the architecture of the company. And I just want to share some of the reasons why some customers have gone with us. Guest service, we'll talk about this. It's a kludgy thing in most environments. We made it completely isolated, very easy to implement. Companies that were in compliance, regulatory requirements, they're choosing us for making that an easy button for bringing guests in. Likewise, the isolation and the degree of zero trust, you're seeing people choose us because everybody was continuing to pitch the legacy architecture, which might be good for a one-time deployment, but then it compounds the complexity of the architecture. So some of them are choosing us for that. And so you see this pattern coming in, and we'll start to talk about what we've done with microsegmentation, what we've done with baking this into the fabric, all of which are starting to represent that architectural shift.